When 6 men were shot and killed during evening prayers in a Quebec City mosque, the Prime Minister called it a terrorist act. But today, Alexandre Bissonnette stands charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder, and he is not facing any terror-related charges. That has been raising questions about what constitutes terrorism under Canadian law. So joining me from Ottawa to help explain is Bain-Sellers-Boxall lawyer Ian Carter. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning.
All right, let me start by giving you 2 scenarios. Back in 2015, 2 men were convicted of terrorism charges after they plotted to derail a passenger train in Toronto. But if you fast forward to 2017, we have an attacker in Quebec City who's charged with murdering 6 people in what seems to have been a targeted attack on people of the Muslim faith, yet no terrorism charges have been filed. So what's the difference?
So the important part here is motivation. There's certain, when you have terrorism charges, you've got to have an evidentiary basis of what the motive is. A political or religious motivation seeking to disrupt. And so in the cases we've seen so far, like the one you've discussed, there's evidence, usually through wiretaps, of planning of that motivation. What we don't know yet is what the motivation was in this attack, and that's a key element with respect to any of the terrorism offenses.
I think a lot of people watching just assume that if you tack on a terrorist charge, it's going to carry a higher penalty. But if first-degree murder carries the highest penalty possible, what's the point of terrorism charges in the first place?
Well, in terms of an ultimate penalty, there's not much difference, because with first-degree murder charges, you get life imprisonment if you're convicted, with no eligibility parole for 25 years. And so any punishment that you would get for a terrorism offense isn't going to be more than that. So, I mean, there's a couple of issues here. The first one is the evidentiary one. Is there evidence that the person had a certain motivation and acting in a group as well? So far, from what we can see, there's elements that this is a lone wolf attack. For many of the terrorism offenses, you need some sort of group element. And then the second point, as you've raised, is what's the point in terms of penalty? Because if convicted of first-degree murder, you're looking at a life sentence with no parole for 25 years.
Ian, the elephant in the room is race. There's a belief in some circles that Muslims who commit these types of crimes are more likely to be hit with terrorism charges than non-Muslims. Does the case of Alexandre Bissonnette help validate those beliefs?
Well, I mean, what we've seen so far in terms of the cases that have been prosecuted in Canada, they've almost all been against Islamic groups. And so there is some sense of that, but I think we need to be cautious here because, again, the issues are motivation and the group element. If you had a scenario where you've got a group that's not Muslim, that's attempting to do something for political or religious reasons that's going to disrupt in a violent way our country, then the offenses are appropriate. The question is, we just haven't seen any of those yet. And so from the outside looking in, it certainly appears if there is a racial or religious element so far, but probably not on purpose, probably more the result of the kinds of investigations that have been conducted.
And Ian, if you throw hate crimes into this as well, I mean, you've got essentially 3 different things. You've got straight murder, and then you have, the case of this could be viewed as a hate crime or a terrorist attack. It seems like we've created a problem for ourselves in sort of defining these things. Do you see this as a case of sort of a mess that we've created inadvertently?
Well, I'm not sure that it's a mess, but it's complicated things, and especially in a case like this, the terrorism offenses were created and have been applied so far primarily in cases of planning. So you look at the Toronto 18, you look at some of the other cases, the Via Rail case that you've talked about. I mean, these are cases where they're stopped short. It's what we call a conspiracy type offense. People are planning, they're normally caught on wiretaps before they act. Using terrorist offenses in the context of when they actually act out, we haven't really seen much of that yet, and that creates some confusion. When are those charges appropriate? What's the overlap with other offenses? Does it add anything to lay these charges? And I think that's what we're facing right now, especially with the comments from the Prime Minister that these are terrorist attacks. The public's wanting to know, well, what makes them terrorist attacks? Why is it different than murder? That's where the confusion comes. I'm not sure it's a mess, but there's confusion around those areas.
Well, it's certainly a new legal order. Bain-Sellers-Boxall lawyer Ian Carter, thank you very much for trying and helping us clear this up today.